The shop smelled like cedar and something older. Wool, maybe, or the particular kind of quiet that collects in places where people have been paying close attention for a long time. I almost didn't come in. I'd stood outside for a full 3 minutes, hand on the door handle, telling myself I was just checking the address. But I knew the address. I'd written it on a post-it and stuck it to my monitor for 2 weeks before I finally called to make an appointment. I knew exactly where I was. I just wasn't sure I was ready to be here. My colleague Priya had been the one to insist. "You need a suit," she'd said, like it was the simplest thing in the world. A real one, not another blazer you bought online at midnight. She'd slid a card across my desk without ceremony. Cream cardstock. A name in small serif font. "He made my wedding suit," she'd said. "He'll take care of you." I hadn't told her why I needed taking care of. I didn't have to. Priya had watched me shrink for 3 years and hadn't said a word, because she knew I wasn't ready to hear it. She just slid a card across my desk when she thought I finally was. So I opened the door. He was finishing with another client when I came in, a tall man in his 60s, being eased out of a jacket with the kind of focused care you'd give something fragile. The tailor, Daniel, the card said, Daniel Voss, didn't look up immediately. He was smoothing the jacket's shoulders with both hands, saying something low and reassuring that I couldn't quite hear. Then the client left and Daniel turned, and he looked at me the way I imagine a doctor looks at an X-ray, not unkindly, but with the specific attention of someone trained to see past the surface. "Ms. Reyes?" "Elena," I said. I'd stopped correcting people back to my first name somewhere around year 2 of my relationship and only recently remembered I preferred it. He nodded once like that was the right answer. "Come in." The fitting room was small and warm, paneled in pale wood, with a low platform in the center and a 3-way mirror that I instinctively didn't want to look at directly. Daniel moved around the space with economy, pulling out a worn leather notebook, selecting a tape measure from a row of them, hanging by the door like tools in a workshop. "Tell me about the occasion," he said. "Gallery opening. I'm the curator. It's a big show, 5 years of work, more or less." I paused. "I want to feel like myself in it." He looked up from his notebook at that. "Just briefly, what does that mean for you, feeling like yourself?" Nobody had asked me that in a long time. I'd gotten used to dressing for other people's comfort. Softer colors, smaller silhouettes, things that didn't take up too much room in a room. I thought about it seriously for a moment. "Like I take up exactly the right amount of space," I said finally. "Not more, not less." He wrote something down. "Okay," he said. "Step up, please." The measuring itself was methodical and careful, and completely unlike what I'd braced for. I'd half expected to feel examined, picked apart. I'd been told for long enough that my body was a problem requiring management, that being looked at by a professional felt loaded in a way I couldn't quite explain. But Daniel moved around me with a kind of focused neutrality that wasn't cold, more like the attention of someone who was genuinely interested in accuracy, in getting it right. He measured my shoulders first, then my arms, calling out numbers in a low voice and writing them in his notebook without comment. Then he crouched in front of me with the tape measure and said, "Don't move," and ran it from my hip to the floor. And something about the phrase, the quiet authority of it, the way it assumed I was capable of staying still, made my throat tighten unexpectedly. I held very still. He rose and moved behind me, drawing the tape around my waist with both hands, and the contact was light and professional and over in seconds, but I was aware of it the way you're aware of being warm after being cold for a long time, present, real. "How do you want the jacket to sit?" he asked from behind my shoulder. "Closer through the waist or more relaxed?" "Closer," I said before I could second guess it. I felt rather than saw him make a note. "First fitting in 3 weeks, he said. "I'll have the shell ready." 3 weeks felt like a long time, and then it wasn't. I came back on a Tuesday evening when the shop was quiet and the late light came through the front windows at a low angle that made everything look warmer than it probably was. Daniel had the jacket, unfinished, pinned, the fabric smooth under my fingers when he helped me into it, and he moved around me slowly, adjusting things with small, precise gestures that required his hands to find my shoulders, my ribs, the line of my spine. At one point he stood in front of me and held a piece of lining, fabric against my collarbone, considering the color against my skin, and his eyes came up from the fabric and met mine in the mirror and stayed there for a moment longer than the task required. Neither of us said anything. He stepped back and made a note. "How does it feel through the shoulders?" He asked, professional again, smooth. "Good," I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "Really good." He asked me to move, raise my arms, turn, reach forward, and each movement told him something. And he adjusted accordingly, hands brief and certain and never once casual. There was a difference I was learning between being touched without thought and being touched with complete attention. I had spent years confusing one for the other. When he helped me out of the jacket at the end, I said, without planning to, "You're very good at making people feel like they're worth the effort." He paused, jacket in his hands. "Most people are," he said. "They've just stopped believing it." I didn't ask him who had stopped believing it for him, but I thought about it on the drive home, and I thought about it for the 3 weeks after that. The final fitting was on a Friday. The suit was finished, jacket and trousers, charcoal with the faintest blue thread running through the weave, the lining a deep rust that you'd only see when I moved. I'd chosen the color myself, from the swatch he'd held to my collarbone 3 weeks ago. He'd noted my expression when he'd held it there and ordered it. Without making it a discussion, I stepped into it and looked in the mirror and felt something shift quietly in my chest. This was what I'd meant. This was what taking up exactly the right amount of space felt like, precise and deliberate, and entirely mine. I'd forgotten this feeling existed. I'd let myself forget. "Turn," Daniel said, from behind me, and I turned, and he moved in to check the fall of the jacket across my shoulders, his hands settling there for a moment. Just a moment, with something that was no longer entirely about the fit. We both knew it. I watched his face in the mirror. He was looking at the jacket, then at me, and the expression on his face was careful in the way of someone who measures things for a living and has learned to be precise about what he names. "It's perfect," I said. "Almost," he said quietly, and adjusted one shoulder seam by what could not have been more than 2 millimeters. His hands stayed a beat longer than that required. I said, "When does a tailor know when something is actually finished?" He looked up and met my eyes in the mirror. "When the person wearing it stops looking for something wrong with themselves," he said. The shop was very quiet. "I'm curating a show," I said. "At the Aldrich. Opens the 14th. I paused. "It's a good show." "I imagine it is. I could put you on the guest list, if you wanted." I kept my voice even. "It seems fair. You came to something of mine." He didn't answer immediately. He stepped back and looked at me. Not the suit, not the tailoring. Just me, with the same focused attention he'd given everything in this room. And this time, I didn't look away from the mirror. I held still, the way he'd asked me to on the first day, and let myself be seen. "What time does it start?" he asked. 7, I said. He nodded once, the way he had when I told him my name, like that was the right answer. He helped me out of the jacket then, his hands careful and unhurried, and folded it over his arm like something worth protecting. We made arrangements for pickup. He walked me to the door, professional, correct. But when I stepped out onto the street and turned back, the door still half open between us, he said, "Elena," just my name, like he'd been waiting to use it. "Yes?" "The lining was the right choice," he said. I smiled. "I know." I walked to my car knowing he was still standing there, and I didn't look back again because I didn't need to. The opening was 2 weeks away. I had a suit that fit me exactly right for the first time in years, and somewhere in a cedar-scented shop on a quiet street, a man who measured things for a living had finally found something he wasn't sure he was looking for. Neither of us was rushing. We'd both learned the hard way that the best things require several fittings before they're ready. Mature audiences 18+. All characters are adults. This story contains emotionally intimate content.